Picture yourself standing at the edge of everything you believe about human history. The textbooks tell us civilization began with Sumer, with the first cities rising from Mesopotamian dust some 6,000 years ago. We've drawn our timelines neatly. Hunter-gatherers became farmers, farmers built villages, villages grew into empires. It's a comforting story, linear and comprehensible. But what if that story is merely the final chapter of a much older book? What if humanity's first steps toward greatness weren't taken 6,000 years ago, but 60,000? What if scattered across our world lie traces of peoples who walked this earth when mammoths still roamed? Who built wonders that time has nearly erased? Who possessed knowledge that vanished into legend? Tonight, we embark on a journey through shadows and whispers, through stone and myth, seeking answers to questions that have haunted curious minds for generations. This isn't a tale of fantasy or wild speculation, but rather an exploration of genuine mysteries that modern science continues to unravel. From submerged ruins beneath tropical waters to massive stone monuments that shouldn't exist according to our timelines, from global flood myths that align with geological catastrophes to mathematical patterns encoded in ancient architecture, the evidence surrounds us. So settle into this investigation with an open mind. Let the familiar certainties fall away for a moment. Consider the ground beneath your feet, the soil that holds secrets from ages beyond memory. Somewhere in those depths might rest the fingerprints of those who came first, waiting patiently for us to finally notice what they left behind. Chapter 1. The Boundaries of Memory. Every schoolchild learns when civilization supposedly began. We mark that threshold at Sumer, around 6 millennia past, where writing emerged, where cities rose, where human organization took its recognizable modern form. Yet each passing decade brings discoveries that push those boundaries backward, challenging assumptions we once held as absolute truth. Consider Göbekli Tepe, rising from Turkish hillsides like a stone riddle. When archaeologists first unearthed this site, they found something that defied explanation. Massive pillars arranged in precise circles, carved with intricate designs, built by people who supposedly knew only hunting and gathering. Radiocarbon dating revealed its age at 11,500 years, constructed millennia before agriculture, before pottery, before the wheel. According to everything we thought we knew, Göbekli Tepe shouldn't exist. Hunter-gatherers weren't supposed to organize large-scale construction projects or create permanent monuments. They should have been too busy surviving to contemplate astronomy or sacred architecture. Yet there it stands, weathered but undeniable. Its pillars still reaching toward the sky after all these centuries. This discovery alone revolutionized our understanding. But it stands merely as one example among many. Throughout our world, similar anomalies emerge from jungle and desert, from ocean floor and buried plain. Each one whispers the same unsettling possibility. Perhaps our ancestors were far more capable, far more organized, far more knowledgeable than we've imagined. The Earth itself proves remarkably skilled at hiding evidence. Volcanic eruptions bury entire cities under meters of ash. Earthquakes topple walls and scatter stones. Rivers change course. Forests reclaim clearings. Deserts swallow settlements. Most dramatically, the oceans themselves have rewritten coastlines, drowning vast territories that once hosted thriving communities. At the last ice age's conclusion, sea levels rose dramatically, more than 100 meters in some regions. Imagine the coastal plains that vanished beneath those rising waters, the river valleys that became underwater trenches, the settlements that transformed into legendary, lost lands. If early peoples had built their first great societies along those ancient shorelines, those achievements now rest beneath hundreds of feet of ocean, accessible only to specialized equipment and determined searchers. Geologists understand these transformations well. They've mapped the continental shelves, those submerged extensions of our continents, and found them dotted with peculiar formations. Some appear natural, sculpted by currents and time. Others provoke endless debate, their geometric precision suggesting intelligent design rather than random erosion. Off Japan's coast lies Yonaguni, a massive underwater structure featuring terraces, steps, and platforms arranged with apparent deliberation. Near India's shores, sonar has detected grid-like patterns stretching for kilometers beneath the sediment. Around Malta, stone walls extend from known ancient harbors into deeper waters, as though the coastline itself had retreated from human habitation. Each discovery remains contentious. Natural processes can create surprising forms, and underwater archaeology demands extraordinary caution before drawing conclusions. Yet the accumulation of these findings grows increasingly difficult to dismiss entirely. They suggest at minimum that our picture of early human development remains incomplete, possibly fundamentally mistaken. Think about what we know for certain. Humans anatomically identical to us have existed for perhaps 200,000 years. For most of that span, we assume they lived simply, without cities or agriculture or complex organization. But assumption isn't evidence. The absence of proof isn't proof of absence, particularly when so much potential evidence lies buried or submerged. Every ancient culture preserved stories about earlier times, about golden ages that preceded their own histories. The Greeks spoke of Atlantis, describing an advanced island civilization destroyed by catastrophe. Hindu texts detailed previous ages of humanity, each rising to greatness before falling. Mesopotamian myths recalled antediluvian kings who ruled for impossible spans. Native American traditions described worlds before this one, destroyed and renewed in endless cycles for generations. Scholars dismiss these as symbolic tales, allegories teaching moral lessons rather than recording actual events. Yet as geological evidence confirms massive floods, sudden climate shifts, and periodic catastrophes, those ancient stories begin sounding less like fantasy and more like memory. Distorted, perhaps, mythologized, certainly, but rooted in experiences so traumatic they echoed through countless generations. The flood myths prove particularly compelling. Nearly every ancient culture possessed one: Mesopotamian Utnapishtim, Biblical Noah, Hindu Manu, Greek Deucalion, Chinese Yu, who tamed the waters, countless indigenous traditions describing world-drowning deluges. Modern science confirms that catastrophic flooding did occur as Ice Age glaciers melted, with meltwater pulses raising sea levels rapidly enough to transform entire landscapes within human memory. Picture witnessing such changes, year after year. The ocean creeping closer, familiar lands vanishing beneath the waves, entire communities forced to migrate inland. Such experiences would certainly be remembered, passed down through oral tradition, eventually codified in myth and scripture. The remarkable consistency of these flood narratives across separated cultures suggests they might all reference the same planetary transformation. Viewed from different shores, this realization opened new questions. If myths preserve genuine memories of geological events, what else might they record? Could stories about lost civilizations, about teachers who came bearing knowledge, about cities beneath the waves, also contain fragments of historical truth? Might humanity's cultural memory extend further backward than written records suggest? The possibility grows more intriguing when we examine other persistent mythological patterns. Tales of giants who built massive structures appear worldwide. Legends of sky gods who taught astronomy recur from Egypt to Mesoamerica. Stories about previous human ages, each destroyed and renewed, echo from India to Scandinavia. Either these arose independently through coincidence, or they stem from some deeper, shared source. Archaeological discoveries continue reshaping these questions. Ground-penetrating radar reveals buried structures beneath known sites, suggesting multiple layers of occupation extending far deeper than expected. Satellite imagery detects geometric patterns under jungle canopy, indicating organized settlements where we assumed only wilderness existed. Ocean floor mapping charts, ancient riverbeds, and coastal features, reconstructing landscapes drowned millennia ago. In the Amazon, researchers now recognize that vast areas once considered pristine wilderness actually hosted substantial pre-Columbian civilizations. Geometric earthworks, road systems, and agricultural modifications extend throughout regions previously thought untouched by human hands. The rainforest had simply reclaimed its territory, hiding human achievements beneath green silence. Similarly, the Sahara conceals evidence of wetter periods when the desert bloomed. Satellite scans detect ancient river systems beneath the sand, suggesting times when the region supported abundant life. Cave paintings throughout North Africa depict giraffes, elephants, and lush vegetation, recording conditions utterly unlike today's aridity. Climate patterns shifted, transforming fertile lands into barrens, erasing settlements and forcing populations to migrate. Each revelation underscores how dynamic our planet remains, how quickly conditions change, how easily civilizations can be erased. Within mere thousands of years, forests become deserts, coastlines retreat, entire landscapes transform beyond recognition. Given such rapid change, could evidence of truly ancient civilizations persist? The honest answer must be, possibly, but barely. Most organic materials decay within centuries. Wood rots, fabric disintegrates, even metals corrode. Only stone endures across deep time, which explains why our oldest archaeological evidence consists primarily of lithic remains. When we find megalithic sites, massive stone circles, terraces, monuments, we're seeing what survived because it was built to survive. The question then becomes, were these oldest stone structures merely the beginning of civilization, or the remnants of something earlier? When we date Göbekli Tepe to 11,000 years ago, are we witnessing humanity's first architectural efforts, or discovering traces of traditions already ancient when those stones were raised? The puzzle deepens when we consider the sophistication displayed at these early sites. Göbekli Tepe's pillars weren't crudely stacked. They were carefully carved, precisely positioned, and organized according to astronomical alignments. Such precision suggests accumulated knowledge, refined techniques, cultural continuity, qualities that don't emerge overnight from hunter-gatherer. Bands with no prior experience. Some researchers now propose that the Ice Age's end didn't mark civilization's dawn, but rather its second morning. Perhaps organized human societies existed before that planetary transformation, thriving along now submerged coastlines, developing technologies and knowledge that seemed lost when catastrophe struck. Survivors might have carried fragments of that knowledge inland, seeding what would later become the first civilizations of recorded history. This hypothesis remains speculative, demanding far more evidence before acceptance. Yet, it addresses puzzling aspects of early civilization that standard timelines struggle to explain. The sudden appearance of sophisticated agriculture, the rapid development of complex writing systems, the seemingly instant emergence of advanced astronomy and mathematics. Knowledge accumulates gradually through observation and experimentation. Yet our earliest civilizations appear already possessing remarkable understanding. Egyptian astronomy at the Old Kingdom's beginning displays sophistication, suggesting long prior development. Sumerian mathematics emerges fully formed with place value notation and geometric principles. The Indus Valley script, though still undeciphered, clearly represents a mature writing system, not humanity's first tentative marks. Where did this knowledge come from? The standard answer credits human ingenuity and rapid development once favorable conditions emerged. Fair enough. Humans are remarkably adaptable and innovative. But the alternative possibility, that some knowledge represented inheritance from earlier traditions, deserves consideration as well. Ancient peoples themselves often claimed their wisdom came from predecessors. Egyptian priests told Greek visitors that their civilization extended far deeper than Greek records suggested. Mayan chronicles described previous world ages. Hindu texts detailed cycles of creation and destruction spanning unimaginable time periods. Were these merely mythological frameworks, or did they preserve distorted memories of actual historical depths? We stand now at an interesting threshold in archaeological understanding. Technology enables us to search more thoroughly than ever before, to peer beneath oceans and jungles, to date materials with increasing precision. Each year brings discoveries that expand history's boundaries. Yet, each answer generates new questions. Each revelation suggests deeper mysteries remaining. The ground beneath us holds secrets we've barely begun accessing. Vast regions remain unexplored, particularly underwater, where most evidence of coastal settlements would rest. Even in well-studied areas, new scanning techniques keep revealing previously invisible features. The past, it seems, extends farther and proves more complex than any single timeline can capture. As we continue this investigation, certain patterns emerge that deserve careful attention. Patterns in architecture, in mythology, in astronomical alignments, in technological achievements. Patterns that repeat across continents and millennia, suggesting either remarkable coincidence or possible connection. These patterns form the next phase of our inquiry, leading us toward questions about shared knowledge and collective memory. Chapter 2. Monuments and Memory Stone speaks a language beyond words. It communicates through placement, through proportion, through endurance itself. When you stand before an ancient monument, a weathered pyramid, a megalithic wall, a carved pillar, something unspoken passes between ages. You sense intention, purpose, the weight of human effort directed toward permanence. These structures weren't merely functional, they were meant to outlast their creators, to carry meaning forward through time. Across our planet, certain architectural forms repeat with remarkable consistency. Pyramidal structures rise from Egyptian sand, Mesoamerican jungles, Chinese plains. Step pyramids appear in Mesopotamia, Peru, Cambodia. Stone circles dot European landscapes, African grasslands, Asian highlands. Massive walls constructed from precisely fitted blocks span continents. From Peru's Sacsayhuaman to Lebanon's Baalbek to Japan's ancient fortifications. These similarities might reflect independent invention, humanity universally drawn to certain stable forms. Yet the precision and sophistication involved suggest something more intriguing, possibly shared principles, inherited knowledge, or at minimum, remarkably parallel development. Consider the Great Pyramid at Giza, that most studied of monuments. Its base aligns almost perfectly with cardinal directions, deviating mere fractions of a degree. Achieving such precision required careful astronomical observation and sophisticated surveying techniques. The pyramid's proportions encode mathematical relationships. The ratio between height and base circumference approximates pi, while other measurements relate to Earth's dimensions and orbital characteristics. Whether these relationships emerged intentionally or coincidentally remains debated, yet they appear too numerous and precise for pure chance. Someone designing this structure understood geometric principles that would remain undiscovered for millennia, according to conventional history. Halfway around the world, Teotihuacan's pyramids display similar geometric sophistication. The Pyramid of the Sun's proportions mirror those at Giza with uncanny similarity. Both complexes align to celestial bodies, both employ precise mathematical ratios, both demonstrate engineering prowess that challenges replication even with modern tools. The coincidence grows more striking when we examine other shared features. Both Egyptian and Mesoamerican pyramids functioned as more than tombs or temples. They served as astronomical observatories, calendrical calculators, and teaching instruments. Both cultures developed sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics, tracking planetary movements and predicting eclipses. Both encoded their knowledge in stone rather than perishable materials. Peru's ancient sites add another layer to this pattern. At Sacsayhuaman and Ollantaytambo, massive stones fit together so precisely that knife blades can't slip between them. Each block features irregular contours, yet they interlock perfectly without mortar. The engineering required to shape and position such stones remains impressive by any standard, suggesting refined techniques developed over generations. Similar precision appears at Pumapunku in Bolivia, where andesite blocks display intricate channels, grooves, and perfectly perpendicular angles. The surfaces appear almost machined, their flatness and uniformity challenging to achieve even with contemporary tools. The methods used remain mysterious, though theories range from unknown alloys for cutting tools to sophisticated abrasion techniques we've since forgotten. These construction methods demonstrate more than technical skill. They reveal accumulated knowledge, refined over time through experimentation and tradition. Such sophistication doesn't emerge spontaneously. It requires continuity, stable cultures maintaining and advancing their understanding across multiple generations. Yet historical records show how easily such continuity breaks. Libraries burn, languages die, oral traditions fade. When civilizations collapse, whether through conquest, natural disaster, or gradual decline, they often take their specialized knowledge with them. Roman concrete formulas were lost for centuries. Damascus steel techniques vanished completely. Greek fire's composition remains unknown today. If specialized knowledge can disappear within recorded history, imagine what might have been lost during prehistory's catastrophes. A major disruption, widespread flooding, volcanic winter, climate shift could shatter transmission lines completely, leaving survivors to rebuild from fragmentary memories. This possibility becomes more plausible when examining archaeological sites showing multiple construction phases. Often, later builders erected structures atop older foundations using cruder techniques, as though they no longer fully understood earlier methods. At Baalbek, for instance, Roman temples rest on massive stone platforms far exceeding Roman engineering capabilities. The Romans themselves seem to have regarded those foundations as mysterious relics of unknown origin. Similar patterns appear at other locations. The Sphinx at Giza shows water erosion patterns suggesting much greater age than conventional dating allows, as though it weathered long periods of heavy rainfall that Egypt hasn't experienced since the Ice Age ended. If accurate, this implies the Sphinx predates Egyptian civilization itself, making it a remnant from whatever culture existed earlier. Göbekli Tepe presents another temporal puzzle. After centuries of use, the site was deliberately buried, covered with tons of fill material, then abandoned. Why would its creators bury their own masterpiece? Perhaps they anticipated catastrophe and hoped preservation beneath Earth would outlast whatever disaster approached. Or perhaps burial itself held symbolic significance, marking an age's end. Throughout ancient architecture, we find evidence of astronomical knowledge far exceeding what primitive people supposedly possessed. Stonehenge aligns precisely with solstice sunrise. Newgrange in Ireland channels light into its inner chamber, only on winter solstice dawn. Angkor Wat's layout mirrors the constellation Draco. Countless temples, pyramids, and stone circles track celestial events with remarkable accuracy. Such alignments required sustained observation spanning generations. Early peoples didn't possess telescopes or advanced mathematics, yet they mapped the heavens with precision rivaling modern astronomy. They recognized precession, that slow wobble of Earth's axis causing apparent star positions to shift across millennia. They tracked planetary movements, predicted eclipses, and calculated astronomical cycles. This knowledge wasn't merely academic. It proved essential for agriculture, navigation, and ritual timing. The heavens provided humanity's first clock and calendar, their movements governing when to plant, when to harvest, when to prepare for seasonal changes. Societies that understood celestial mechanics gained significant advantages. Yet the sophistication displayed goes beyond practical necessity. Many ancient sites encode complex mathematical relationships and geometric principles seemingly for their own sake, as though the builders wanted to demonstrate their understanding to future generations. The golden ratio appears in temple proportions worldwide. Fibonacci sequences govern spacing and dimensions. Harmonic ratios structure acoustic properties of ceremonial chambers. At Malta's hypogem, carved entirely underground, chambers resonate at frequencies affecting human neural activity. When someone chants inside, the stone itself vibrates, creating physical sensations throughout the space. This wasn't accidental. The builders deliberately shaped rock to achieve specific acoustic effects. Similar acoustic engineering appears at other sites. Mexico's Pyramid of Kukulkan produces a sound resembling a sacred bird's call when someone claps before its staircase. Egyptian chambers amplify certain frequencies while dampening others. British stone circles create acoustic zones where sound behaves unexpectedly. These acoustic properties suggest builders understood sound propagation, resonance, and harmonics, principles we now study through physics, but which ancient peoples apparently grasped through direct experimentation. Their knowledge took different forms than ours, expressed through practice rather than theory, but its sophistication remains undeniable. The question haunting these discoveries remains, how did they learn it? Without formal scientific method, without instruments or mathematics as we know them, how did ancient builders develop such refined understanding? The conventional answer credits extended trial and error, with successful techniques preserved through cultural transmission. Certainly that process occurred. Yet the consistency and sophistication suggest something more. Perhaps inherited knowledge, foundational principles passed down from earlier masters. If so, those original teachers might have belonged to traditions extending far deeper than recorded history, their knowledge fragmenting and dispersing when their civilization fell. Ancient myths often describe exactly this scenario. Wise teachers arriving after catastrophe, bringing knowledge to survivors, instructing them in agriculture, architecture, astronomy, and governance. Whether these teachers were literal survivors of fallen civilizations or mythological personifications of inherited wisdom, the pattern repeats globally. Egyptians credited Thoth, Sumerians spoke of the Anunnaki, Mayans revered Kukulkan, Incas honored Viracocha, all described as culture bringers who established civilization's foundations. These figures weren't conquerors but instructors, not gods demanding worship, but teachers offering knowledge. Perhaps these myths preserve memories of actual knowledge transfer. When survivors of earlier societies shared their understanding with peoples rebuilding after catastrophe. To recipients lacking context, such advanced knowledge would seem divine. Teachers capable of predicting eclipses, calculating planetary movements, or designing earthquake-resistant structures would naturally be remembered as possessing supernatural wisdom. The distribution of certain architectural principles supports this interpretation. The polygonal masonry technique, interlocking irregular stones without mortar, appears in both Japan and South America, regions with no known historical contact. The similarity suggests either remarkable parallel invention or possible transmission through intermediary cultures now lost. Pyramidal forms emerged independently on multiple continents, yet share specific features beyond basic shape. Step pyramids with precise astronomical alignments, internal chambers following geometric patterns, surfaces encoding mathematical relationships. These similarities transcend coincidence. Even agricultural techniques show unexpected parallels. Terracing methods optimized for different climates appear in Peru, Philippines, China, and Madagascar, each adapted to local conditions, yet sharing fundamental engineering principles. Such consistency suggests underlying knowledge systems that spread through human populations, adapted and refined across generations. Language itself hints at deep connections. Certain fundamental words, terms for sun, earth, stone, water, show structural similarities across seemingly unrelated language families. While linguistic drift creates convergence patterns naturally, some correlations suggest possible common roots extending to remarkable depths. Genetic studies reveal that human populations mixed and migrated far more extensively than previously assumed. DNA evidence shows multiple waves of movement across continents, with populations separated for millennia, occasionally reconnecting. These migrations carried more than genes. They transported ideas, techniques, stories, cultural knowledge that could propagate globally over sufficient time. If an earlier civilization existed along ancient coastlines before rising seas drowned those lands, its refugees might have spread in all directions, carrying fragments of knowledge to scattered populations. Over millennia, those fragments would evolve independently, adapting to new environments while retaining core principles. The result would be precisely what we observe: global distribution of similar concepts expressed through diverse cultural lenses. This hypothesis remains speculative, requiring far more evidence than currently exists. Yet, it offers coherent explanation for otherwise puzzling patterns. It suggests that human civilization's foundations might extend deeper than recorded history captures, that our ancestors might have inherited more knowledge than they originally developed themselves. The alternative explanation, pure independent invention, certainly deserves consideration. Human minds function similarly regardless of location, noticing the same natural patterns, drawn to the same stable forms. Given similar challenges, people might develop similar solutions everywhere. Yet some parallels strain this explanation. The precise astronomical alignments, the sophisticated mathematics, the advanced engineering techniques, these represent not basic solutions to survival needs, but refined understanding developed through extended observation and experimentation. That such similar sophistication emerged simultaneously across separated continents seems remarkable, though not impossible. Perhaps the truth combines both interpretations. Humans everywhere possess capacity for innovation and discovery, but they also inherit knowledge from predecessors. Each generation builds on foundations laid before, sometimes adding new insights, sometimes merely maintaining what earlier masters achieved. When we examine ancient monuments, we're seeing accumulated wisdom frozen in stone. Each block placed, each alignment calculated, each proportion chosen represents decisions made by people who understood their world deeply. They encoded that understanding in the only permanent medium available, creating messages that transcend language barriers. Stone doesn't speak in words, but in relationships, between earth and sky, between geometry and harmony, between human ambition and natural law. Those ancient builders seem to have grasped something fundamental, that knowledge must be embedded in durable form to survive catastrophe. That understanding can outlast empires if expressed through universal principles. Their monuments stand as testament not merely to what they built, but to what they knew. And increasingly, as we decode those stone texts, we realize they knew far more than we've given them credit for. Their wisdom might not have matched ours in breadth, but in certain domains, astronomy, architecture, harmony with natural cycles, they achieved sophistication we're only beginning to appreciate. This realization humbles our modern perspective. We assumed linear progress, with earlier peoples necessarily less capable than ourselves. Yet, evidence suggests capabilities waxed and waned through history, with periods of advancement followed by collapse and rebuilding. The graph of human knowledge might resemble waves rather than a straight line, rising and falling through ages, each peak building on foundations laid by previous cycles. If so, we might not be discovering ancient secrets so much as rediscovering them, finding again what was once known, lost, then preserved in fragmentary form through myth and monument. The patterns we now decode might have been common knowledge to earlier peoples, their science expressed differently than ours, but no less valid. As we continue exploring these ancient works, the question shifts from how did they do it to what did they understand that we've forgotten? That inquiry leads us naturally toward considering what else might be encoded in these structures. Not just technical knowledge, but perhaps warnings, instructions, or messages specifically intended for distant descendants like ourselves. Chapter 3. Beneath the Waves. If you could somehow drain the world's oceans for a single hour and gaze upon the exposed seabed, you would witness a transformation of our understanding so profound that every history book would require rewriting. Beneath those dark waters lie vast plains that once knew sunlight, river valleys where ancient peoples might have hunted, mountain ranges that formed natural boundaries between vanished territories. The continental shelves, those submerged extensions of our landmasses, hide landscapes that stood above water when mammoths walked the earth. The ocean's surface isn't fixed. It rises and falls with the planet's thermal rhythms, advancing during warm periods, retreating during ice ages. At the last glacial maximum, roughly 20,000 years ago, enormous ice sheets covered much of North America, Europe, and Asia, locking away so much water that sea levels dropped approximately 120 meters below their current position. That meant coastlines extended hundreds of kilometers beyond today's shores. Britain connected directly to continental Europe through a region called Doggerland. Indonesia, Malaysia, and surrounding islands merged into a single landmass known as Sunda. The Bering Strait formed a wide land bridge between Asia and North America. Entire fertile plains stretched where now only cold ocean exists. When the ice began melting around 15,000 years ago, those landscapes drowned gradually at first, then in dramatic pulses as massive ice dams burst or glacial sheets collapsed. Meltwater surged into ocean basins, raising levels by meters within generations. Imagine witnessing such transformation. Year by year, familiar territories vanishing beneath advancing waves, communities forced to migrate or perish. For coastal populations, it would have felt apocalyptic. Stories of those catastrophes would naturally be passed down through oral tradition, eventually becoming the flood myths found in virtually every ancient culture. The remarkable consistency of these narratives, a great deluge, divine warning, few survivors, world renewal, suggests they all reference the same planetary event viewed from different shores. Modern archaeology now focuses increasingly on these drowned lands. The challenge proves immense. The ocean is vast, its depths dark and dangerous, its currents powerful. Yet advancing technology, sophisticated sonar, underwater drones, satellite mapping, gradually reveals what lies beneath. One of the most debated underwater sites lies off Japan's coast near Yonaguni Island. About 25 meters down rests a massive formation displaying terraces, platforms, and what appear to be carved steps. Some surfaces show sharp right angles and flat planes difficult to attribute to natural erosion. The structure rises like a sunken ziggurat, its geometric precision suggesting intelligent design. Geologists remain divided. Some argue that natural forces, tectonic activity, current erosion, could produce such forms. Others point to specific features that seem deliberately modified. Straight edges, carved channels, arranged surfaces. The debate continues, but regardless of origin, Yonaguni reminds us how easily architectural features can be mistaken for natural formations underwater, and vice versa. Farther west, sonar scans in India's Gulf of Kambat detected patterns resembling urban layouts beneath sediment layers. Grid-like formations stretching several kilometers, with artifacts recovered and dated to approximately 9,000 years ago. If these represent genuine urban remains, they predate any known city on land, suggesting organized societies flourished along ancient coastlines before rising seas claimed them. The Mediterranean also harbors submerged mysteries. Near Malta, stone walls extend from known ancient harbors into deeper water, their alignment and construction suggesting they once stood on dry land. Around Greece, Cyprus, and other islands, divers regularly discover structures beneath the waves: walls, terraces, apparent building foundations resting where beaches once lay. Each discovery generates controversy. Underwater archaeology demands extreme caution. Natural formations can mimic human construction remarkably well. Wave action creates regular patterns. Tectonic activity produces geometric shapes. Coral growth obscures underlying features. Confirming artificial origin requires overwhelming evidence. Tool marks, deliberate stacking patterns, materials transported from elsewhere. Yet the accumulation of potential sites grows difficult to dismiss entirely. Around the world, from the Caribbean to Southeast Asia to the Atlantic, underwater features provoke questions. Individually, each might be natural. Collectively, they suggest vast regions once supporting human habitation now lie drowned, their evidence scattered and buried. When scientists map the ocean floor in detail, they find more than just mysterious structures. They discover ancient riverbeds winding across what is now open sea, deltas frozen in sediment, shore features marking vanished coastlines. Off North America's eastern seaboard, enormous river systems appear on sonar, showing where land once extended far beyond present shores. In the North Sea, researchers have reconstructed Doggerland's topography. This low-lying region connected Britain to Europe for thousands of years, hosting forests, lakes, grasslands, and abundant wildlife. Humans thrived there, hunting, fishing, gathering. Then, around 8,000 years ago, catastrophic flooding struck, possibly triggered by underwater landslides or sudden glacial collapse, and much of Doggerland vanished within days or weeks. Today, fishing trawlers occasionally dredge up evidence from those drowned lands: worked stone tools, animal bones showing butchery marks, even fragments of ancient structures. Each artifact reinforces the reality that substantial human populations inhabited regions now underwater, their settlements and achievements lost beneath the waves. This realization transforms our understanding of early human development. Traditional timelines assumed civilization emerged only after the Ice Age ended, when stable climate enabled agriculture's spread. Yet that assumption ignored the obvious. Humans had already existed for tens of thousands of years, and the most favorable territories during glacial periods were coastal plains now submerged. If early humans developed organized communities along those ancient shorelines, building permanent structures, trading over distances, accumulating knowledge, then evidence of their achievements lies underwater. Inaccessible throughout recorded history until recently. Deep-sea sediment cores provide another window into this hidden past. Scientists drilling into the ocean floor extract cylinders of sediment representing thousands of years of accumulation. By analyzing these layers, they reconstruct ancient climates, sea levels, and even vegetation patterns from pollen preserved in the mud. Some researchers now search these cores for chemical signatures that might indicate human activity. Unusual concentrations of metals suggesting mining or smelting. Carbon isotope ratios reflecting large-scale burning. Pollutants that couldn't occur naturally. While no definitive evidence has emerged yet, the technique itself demonstrates how traces of earlier civilizations might survive in forms we're only beginning to recognize. The Silurian hypothesis, proposed by astrophysicists Adam Frank and Gavin Schmidt, explores this possibility rigorously. They asked, if an industrial civilization existed millions of years ago, could we detect it? Their unsettling conclusion, probably not. Geological processes recycle the crust over such timespans, erasing nearly all physical evidence. Only subtle chemical anomalies in specific sediment layers might remain, applied to shorter timescales. Tens of thousands rather than millions of years. This principle still holds. Most evidence of ancient coastal civilizations would be destroyed, buried, or scattered. Only the most durable elements might persist. Stone structures if they existed, odd chemical signatures, and memories preserved through mythology. The mythology angle deserves particular attention. Ancient cultures worldwide describe lost lands swallowed by the sea. Plato's Atlantis remains most famous, but similar legends appear everywhere. Lioness off Britain's coast, High Brazil in Irish lore, Kumari Kandam in Tamil tradition, Lemuria in Pacific mythology. Each tale describes prosperous civilizations destroyed when the ocean advanced. Modern geology confirms that such drowning events occurred. Whether the myths reference specific locations or represent generalized memories of widespread coastal flooding, they preserve genuine knowledge of planetary transformation. The survivors of those events carried stories of lost homelands into their new territories. Stories that evolved into legend, but retained emotional truth. Some underwater sites show features particularly difficult to explain through natural processes alone. At Pavlopetri off Greece's coast, archaeologists mapped a complete submerged city. Streets, buildings, courtyards, all dated to roughly 5,000 years ago. While this falls within recorded history, it demonstrates how entire urban settlements can vanish beneath waves, yet remain remarkably preserved. If such sites exist from known history, logic suggests others might lie deeper, older, from forgotten ages. The ocean floor remains largely unexplored, roughly 80% of it unmapped in detail. We've examined Earth's surface from space more thoroughly than we've examined our own ocean depths. As scanning technology improves, new features emerge regularly. Straight lines where nature rarely produces them, circular depressions too regular for random formation, symmetrical ridges challenging to attribute solely to geology. Some prove natural upon investigation. Others resist easy categorization, remaining ambiguous. Even the formations eventually explained as natural teach important lessons about Earth's complexity. The planet constantly surprises us with its creative power, producing shapes and patterns we might assume required intelligence. That fact should make us appropriately cautious, avoiding hasty conclusions about underwater anomalies. Yet, caution shouldn't become closed-mindedness. The ocean demonstrably hides human history. We know substantial populations lived on now-drowned lands. The only questions are, how organized were those populations, and what remains of their activities? Chemical analysis of seafloor sediments offers one approach to these questions. Scientists study cores for microscopic evidence, sudden vegetation changes, unusual carbon spikes, trace elements suggesting human activity. So far, results remain inconclusive, but techniques keep improving. What seems undetectable today might become obvious tomorrow. The ocean also preserves through burial. Unlike land where exposure causes rapid decay, material buried in seafloor sediment can survive millennia. Shipwrecks centuries old emerge remarkably intact when protected from oxygen and organisms. Stone structures endure even better, potentially lasting tens of thousands of years if covered quickly. This preservation potential means that somewhere in the drowned landscapes of the continental shelves, evidence might await discovery. Ports and harbors from when shorelines lay farther out. Buildings from communities that thrived before flooding struck. Artifacts from peoples whose names no written record preserves. The search continues. Driven by curiosity and improving technology, each year brings new sonar data, new mapping projects, new discoveries that add pieces to the puzzle. Slowly, the hidden history of our species' relationship with the ocean comes into focus. That relationship has always been complex. The sea provides food and trade routes, but also threatens with storms and rising tides. Ancient peoples understood this duality, regarding oceans as both life-giver and destroyer. When waters advanced catastrophically, drowning their world, they experienced that duality in its most extreme form. Their descendants remembered, encoding warnings in myth and legend. Those stories persisted because they carried weight, not just symbolic meaning, but practical wisdom. The world can change suddenly. The sea can rise. Nothing built on coastlines is permanent. These truths, learned through bitter experience, survived in narrative form when physical evidence washed away. Modern civilization, pressing ever closer to water's edge, might benefit from heeding those ancient warnings. Sea levels continue rising as climate warms, threatening coastal communities worldwide. We too might someday become subjects of future myths. Advanced peoples who built beside the sea, only to watch it claim their works. The ocean remains both archive and eraser, keeping what it chooses while destroying the rest. Its depths hold secrets we've barely begun accessing. As exploration continues, we may find that human history extends far deeper underwater than conventional timelines acknowledge. Or we may confirm that coastal settlements remained simple until recent millennia. Either way, the search itself proves valuable. It reminds us that absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence, particularly when so much potential evidence lies beneath hundreds of feet of water. It teaches humility about our knowledge, showing how much remains unknown about our own origins. The drowned lands whisper to us still, not in words, but in possibilities. They suggest that catastrophe has always been part of human experience, that civilizations have risen and fallen with planetary rhythms, that memory survives even when monuments don't. And they remind us that the most important evidence might lie not in what we can see, but in what the Earth has hidden, waiting patiently for us to develop the wisdom and technology to finally listen. Chapter 4. The geometry of the ancients. Everywhere across this planet, patterns emerge where logic suggests they shouldn't exist. Circles perfectly round, lines impossibly straight, alignments too precise for accident. When modern surveyors map ancient monuments, they discover mathematical relationships that seem anachronistic, geometric principles, and astronomical knowledge that supposedly wouldn't be understood for thousands of years after these structures were built. Perhaps it's human nature to find order in chaos, to see patterns even in randomness. Yet the consistency and sophistication of ancient alignments challenge that dismissive explanation. These weren't vague correspondences, but exact measurements, deliberate calculations, sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics and terrestrial geometry. The Great Pyramid at Giza exemplifies this precision. Its base aligns with cardinal directions, north, south, east, west, with an error margin of less than 1/20th of a degree. Achieving such accuracy required careful astronomical observation and advanced surveying techniques. Without modern instruments, the builders somehow determined true north with astonishing exactitude. The pyramid's proportions encode further mysteries. The ratio between its height and the circumference of its base approximates pi, 3.1141 with remarkable accuracy. Whether this emerged intentionally or coincidentally remains debated, but it appears too precise for pure chance. Other measurements relate to Earth's dimensions. The pyramid's perimeter at its base matches half a minute of latitude at the equator when multiplied appropriately. Halfway around the world at Teotihuacan in Mexico, the Pyramid of the Sun displays similar geometric sophistication. Its proportions mirror Giza's with uncanny similarity. Both complexes align to celestial bodies. Both employ mathematical ratios. Both demonstrate engineering prowess that challenges replication even with contemporary tools. The coincidence grows more striking when we note the latitude relationships. Teotihuacan sits at 1969 degrees north, while Giza rests at 2997 degrees north. These positions, when examined mathematically, show proportional relationships to Earth's dimensions and to each other. The likelihood of such parallels arising independently, across an ocean and several millennia, seems remarkably small. Even more intriguing, many ancient sites worldwide fall along what geometers call great circles, the shortest possible paths around a sphere. When researchers plot coordinates of major monuments, Giza, Easter Island, Machu Picchu, Angkor Wat, Mohenjo-daro, they sometimes find these sites fall along or near such circles. Skeptics rightly note that with enough points, any pattern can emerge mathematically. Fair criticism. Yet, the alignments involve not random locations, but specifically the world's most sophisticated ancient monuments, suggesting possible intentionality rather than coincidence. These sites also display astronomical alignments far exceeding what primitive peoples supposedly understood. At Stonehenge, the axis points directly toward midsummer sunrise, a relationship that required sustained observation to determine. At Newgrange in Ireland, sunlight penetrates the inner chamber only during winter solstice dawn, illuminating the passage in a shaft of golden light. Angkor Wat's layout mirrors the constellation Draco with impressive fidelity. The Temple of Kukulkan at Chichen Itza casts a serpent-shaped shadow during equinoxes, perfectly matching mythology about the feathered serpent descending from heaven. Countless monuments worldwide mark solstices, equinoxes, and stellar positions with precision rivaling modern astronomy. Such alignments required more than casual sky-watching. They demanded sustained observation across generations, mathematical calculation, and understanding of Earth's axial precession, that slow wobble causing apparent star positions to shift across millennia. The Great Pyramid's shafts once pointed toward Orion's belt and Thuban, the pole star of that era, not the one visible today. This suggests builders understood precession, recognizing that stellar positions change over time. Such knowledge represents sophisticated astronomical understanding, typically attributed to much later civilizations. Yet the physical evidence demonstrates that ancient peoples possessed this awareness. Whatever we might assume about their capabilities, Certain numbers recur across ancient architecture with suspicious frequency: 72, 108, 216, 432, and their multiples. These aren't random. They relate to precessional cycles. Earth's axis completes one full wobble approximately every 25,920 years. Divide that by 360 degrees, and you get 72 years per degree of precession, a number appearing throughout ancient mythology and architecture. Hindu cosmology describes vast time cycles, the Kali Yuga lasting 432,000 years, with other yugas following similar numerical patterns. Norse mythology mentions 432,000 warriors in Valhalla. Sumerian king lists record reigns totaling precisely these same numbers. The recurrence across separated cultures suggests these weren't arbitrary, but represented encoded knowledge of cosmic cycles. Ancient architecture also displays remarkable acoustic properties. At Malta's Hypogeum, an underground temple carved 5,000 years ago, certain chambers resonate at frequencies affecting human neural activity. When someone chants inside, the entire space vibrates, creating physical sensations throughout the body. This wasn't accidental. The builders deliberately shaped stone to achieve specific acoustic effects. Similar acoustic engineering appears globally. Mexico's pyramids produce specific sound effects when approached correctly. Clap before Kukulkan's staircase, and the echo resembles the sacred Quetzal bird's call. Egyptian chambers amplify certain frequencies while dampening others. British stone circles create acoustic zones where sound behaves unexpectedly, amplifying voices or creating strange reverberations. These acoustic properties demonstrate understanding of sound propagation, resonance, and harmonics, principles we associate with physics and engineering. Ancient builders apparently grasped these concepts through direct experimentation, achieving results that still impress modern acousticians. The precision of ancient stonework presents another mystery. At Pumapunku in Bolivia, massive andesite blocks fit together with microscopic accuracy, their surfaces smooth and polished, their edges meeting at perfect right angles. Each stone weighs dozens of tons, yet they align precisely along straight edges. Without iron tools, steel saws, or modern machinery, achieving such consistency seems nearly impossible. Nearby at Sacsayhuaman, megalithic walls employ jigsaw construction, irregularly shaped stones carved to mesh exactly with neighbors, joints so tight that razor blades can't penetrate between them. The engineering required to achieve this, even with time and determination, demands sophisticated understanding of structural mechanics, material properties, and three-dimensional geometry. Some researchers propose that ancient builders understood principles we're only rediscovering. Resonance techniques for moving massive stones, acoustic methods for shaping rock, or lost technologies for cutting and polishing. While speculative, these theories address genuine puzzles about how such precision was achieved with supposedly primitive tools. The golden ratio, approximately 1.618, appears in ancient architecture worldwide. Greek temples, Egyptian pyramids, Cambodian complexes all display proportions following this mathematical constant. Whether builders consciously calculated it or intuitively recognized its aesthetic harmony, the consistency across cultures suggests deep appreciation for geometric principles. Fibonacci sequences, where each number equals the sum of the previous two, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, also appear in ancient design. Spiral patterns following these sequences adorn monuments globally, from Celtic carvings to Mayan art to Buddhist mandalas. These aren't coincidences, but deliberate applications of mathematical patterns observed in nature, in nautilus shells, pine cones, flower petals, galaxy spirals. Ancient peoples recognized that certain proportions and patterns recur throughout the natural world. By incorporating those same relationships into their architecture, they created structures that felt harmonious, that resonated with observers on intuitive levels. They were building with nature's own geometry, using mathematics not through abstract calculation, but through direct observation and application. Map ancient sites globally, and curious patterns emerge. Many fall along latitude lines showing simple mathematical relationships. Others cluster around specific angles or distances. Some researchers claim these reflect deliberate planning, perhaps indicating a global network of sacred sites or remnants of knowledge shared across vast distances. Mainstream archaeology remains skeptical of such claims, noting that pattern seeking can find connections anywhere if one looks hard enough. valid criticism. Yet the sheer number of coincidences, mathematical, astronomical, geometric, challenges purely dismissive attitudes. At minimum, ancient peoples possessed greater sophistication than traditionally acknowledged. Consider the implications. If these monuments encode advanced knowledge, who discovered that knowledge originally? Individual cultures developing independently could explain some parallels. But the global consistency of certain principles suggests either remarkable parallel invention or possible transmission through now-lost intermediary cultures, perhaps an earlier civilization, the hypothetical. First, we've been exploring accumulated, significant astronomical and mathematical knowledge before catastrophe struck. Survivors might have carried fragments of that understanding to various regions, where it was preserved, adapted, and eventually incorporated into the monuments we now study. This hypothesis remains speculative, requiring far more evidence than currently exists, yet it offers coherent explanation for otherwise puzzling patterns. The sudden appearance of sophisticated knowledge in early civilizations, the global distribution of similar architectural principles, the astronomical understanding preceding written records of its development. Alternatively, human intelligence itself might account for these patterns. Given similar observational tools, naked eyes, simple measuring devices, and similar goals, marking seasons, honoring cosmic forces, creating enduring monuments, different cultures might naturally converge on similar solutions. The night sky looks essentially identical everywhere at similar latitudes after all. Both explanations hold merit. Humans are remarkably innovative, capable of independent discovery. Yet they also inherit knowledge from predecessors, building on foundations laid generations earlier. The truth likely combines both factors. Original innovation supplemented by inherited wisdom, with transmission occurring through migration, trade, and cultural exchange. What remains undeniable is that ancient monuments hold data: astronomical, mathematical, acoustic, geometric. They represent repositories of knowledge, encoded in form rather than writing. To build structures marking solstices requires decades of observation. To incorporate precise mathematical ratios demands understanding of geometric principles. To achieve acoustic effects requires experimentation with resonance and harmonics. These weren't primitive peoples stumbling upon fortunate coincidences. They were sophisticated observers, patient experimenters, skilled engineers who understood their world deeply and encoded that understanding in the most durable medium available: stone itself. The patterns they left behind speak across millennia in a universal language. Mathematics doesn't require translation. Pi means the same thing to any intelligence, regardless of culture or era. Astronomical alignments remain verifiable across time. Geometric relationships persist unchanged. In this sense, ancient monuments function as messages, communications sent forward through time, using the only language guaranteed to outlast their creators. Whether consciously intended as such, or simply representing the natural human impulse to build meaningful structures, the result is the same: knowledge preserved in form, waiting for future generations to decode. As our own civilization creates similar monuments, satellite networks orbiting Earth, deep space probes carrying information about our world, digital archives meant to outlast us, we're repeating patterns established millennia ago. The impulse to leave something behind, to encode understanding in durable form, to communicate with whoever comes next, seems fundamental to intelligence itself. Perhaps that's the real significance of these ancient patterns. They demonstrate that the drive to understand and to be understood transcends individual cultures or eras. It's a universal aspect of consciousness, expressing itself through whatever medium proves available. For ancient peoples, that medium was stone, sky, and geometry. For us, it's technology and data. But the underlying impulse remains identical. The patterns left by ancient builders might not prove the existence of a single, first civilization. But they do demonstrate that human capacity for sophisticated thought extends far deeper into prehistory than we once imagined. They show that our ancestors were not primitive, but merely different, expressing intelligence through paths divergent from, but no less valid than our own. As we continue decoding these ancient patterns, we're engaging in a dialogue across time. They spoke through geometry. We respond through analysis. They encoded knowledge in stone. We extract it through measurement. The conversation continues, spanning millennia, connecting minds separated by vast chasms of time. yet united by shared curiosity about the cosmos and our place within it. Chapter 5. The planet's hidden record. When we speak of memory, we typically mean something personal, consciousness holding on to experience, mind storing information. Yet memory exists in far broader forms. The Earth itself remembers, not through thought, but through physical record. Every rainstorm, every eruption, every living thing that has ever existed leaves traces. Over billions of years, those traces accumulate in layers, pressed into rock, dissolved into oceans, frozen into glacial ice. Together, these traces form the planet's memory, an unbroken archive of transformation written in a language of chemistry and sediment. If we learn to read it properly, we might discover that Earth has recorded everything, including evidence of civilizations that rose and fell before our own. When geologists slice into cliff faces or drill cores from ocean floors, they're essentially reading pages from this planetary diary. Each sediment layer represents a chapter: volcanic ash marking catastrophic eruptions, pollen grains revealing ancient vegetation, isotopic ratios indicating temperature fluctuations. The record extends back not just thousands, but millions of years. In Greenland and Antarctica, ice cores stretch back 800,000 years, trapping tiny bubbles of ancient atmosphere. Scientists analyze these frozen time capsules, reconstructing past climates with remarkable precision. They can determine when the planet warmed, when it cooled, when massive fires burned, when volcanism intensified, all from chemical signatures preserved in ice. Occasionally, these cores reveal anomalies, unexpected carbon spikes, unusual metal concentrations, isotopic ratios suggesting something extraordinary occurred. Usually these have natural explanations: meteor impacts, volcanic eruptions, forest fires triggered by lightning. But a few researchers have begun asking an almost heretical question. What if some anomalies resulted from technological activity? This inquiry led to the Silurian hypothesis, proposed by astrophysicists Adam Frank and Gavin Schmidt. They asked, if an industrial civilization existed millions of years ago, during the age of dinosaurs for instance, could we detect it today? Their unsettling conclusion: probably not. Geological processes constantly recycle Earth's crust. Tectonic plates sink into the mantle, melt and resurface as new rock. In a few million years, erosion, metamorphism, and chemical weathering erase nearly every trace of surface activity. What might remain are subtle chemical signatures, anomalies in sediment layers, unusual isotopic ratios, perhaps concentrations of rare elements. This principle applies even at shorter timescales. A civilization existing 50,000 years ago would leave minimal physical evidence today. Most materials decay rapidly. Organic matter disappears within centuries. Metals corrode. Even concrete crumbles. Only stone structures might persist, and even those would erode beyond recognition over sufficient time. If such ancient civilizations existed, we wouldn't find their cities or machines. We'd find hints written in Earth's chemical memory: unexpected carbon spikes, peculiar metal distributions, isotopic signatures that don't occur naturally. Reading this requires examining sediment cores, ice samples, and rock strata at molecular levels. We already do this when studying our own industrial impact. Fossil fuel combustion changes atmospheric carbon isotope ratios. Plastic production leaves polymer residues settling into ocean sediments. Nuclear testing deposits radioactive isotopes globally. Future geologists analyzing our era would see a distinct chemical signature marking the Anthropocene, the age when humans briefly altered. Planetary chemistry, if similar signatures existed in deeper layers, they might indicate earlier technological phases. So far, nothing definitive has emerged, but the search itself proves valuable. It demonstrates how civilizations, no matter how advanced, remain temporary compared to planetary timescales. We tend to think of ancient ruins as ancient, but even the oldest pyramids represent mere blinks in geological time, a few thousand years against Earth's 4.5 billion. The planet measures existence in millions and billions of years. Across such spans, almost everything dissolves, recycles, transforms. Yet even within this constant erasure, traces survive. Zircon crystals older than the moon persist. Dust grains that once floated through primordial skies still exist within rock. In these microscopic remnants, scientists detect signatures of ancient atmospheres, revealing when oxygen first accumulated, when photosynthesis began, when carbon levels spiked unexpectedly. These spikes represent Earth's emotional memory, moments so intense they left permanent scars. If a technological society had ever existed before, we might find its scars similarly. Not fossilized machines, but chemical aftermath. The residue of whatever energy sources it utilized. The geological record also preserves biological memory. Every species carries genetic imprints of its ancestors, tiny records of adaptation and survival. Human DNA tells stories older than written history, revealing that our species nearly went extinct around 70,000 years ago, perhaps reduced to mere thousands of individuals after a massive volcanic eruption. That genetic bottleneck would have obliterated much diversity, including any traces of parallel human populations. If advanced human cultures existed before that catastrophe, their lineages might have ended there, erased by simple mathematics of survival. What remained became us, a species with amnesia, beginning again on the same ancient stage. Sometimes geologists describe Earth's past like a heartbeat. Slow warming, slow cooling, steady pulses of life and death, but occasionally the rhythm stutters. Something extraordinary happens. A mass extinction, a sudden flood, an abrupt carbon rise. These interruptions mark turning points, as if each were a chapter break in the planet's autobiography. What makes testing for ancient civilizations so difficult is time itself. The further back you examine, the less distinct the record becomes. Rock layers twist, compress, metamorphose. Entire regions sink into the mantle and resurface millions of years later as mountains. Yet even within this destruction, fragments persist, and within those fragments lie signatures of atmospheric change. Take global flood myths, found on nearly every continent. The Mesopotamian Gilgamesh epic, biblical Noah, Hindu Manu, Greek Deucalion, Native American renewal stories all describe great deluges wiping away previous worlds. Scholars initially interpreted these as symbolic tales, but modern geology confirms that massive floods did reshape the planet as the Ice Age ended. Meltwater pulses raised sea levels catastrophically, drowning vast coastal regions. Glacial lakes burst through ice dams, carving canyons overnight. For people witnessing these transformations, it truly was the end of their world. Generations later, that memory crystallized into legend, a cautionary tale, a remembrance of lost ages. What fascinates researchers is how precisely these stories align with geological events. It's as if humanity has been attempting to remind itself of something once known, that the world can transform suddenly, that entire civilizations can vanish, that clues to their existence might still lie somewhere just beyond reach. Modern technology helps us look again. Ground-penetrating radar, satellite imaging, and oceanic sonar scanning reveal buried structures previously unknown. In the Amazon, researchers find traces of ancient road systems hidden under centuries of forest. In the Sahara, buried rivers and settlements suggest times when the desert was green and populated. Each discovery reshapes our picture of early human capabilities. The more we find, the more we realize how incomplete our understanding remains. The soil beneath us isn't just dirt, it's a library. Every layer holds a page from a different chapter of planetary history. To read it requires patience, the kind the Earth itself practices. Stone doesn't hurry, sediment doesn't argue, it just waits. And within that stillness might be the record of worlds we've forgotten, preserved not in monuments, but in molecular signatures, waiting for us to develop sufficient wisdom and technology to interpret them properly. Oceans store their memories similarly. Sediments settle gently over centuries, forming soft layers trapping the smallest remains of life. Shells, plankton, dust from distant continents. Scientists analyze these layers grain by grain, reconstructing temperatures, oxygen levels, even wind patterns from eons past. Somewhere in those layers could be unexplained anomalies, spikes of metals, strange molecules, chemical whispers of something we can't yet explain. Perhaps we've already collected such samples, sitting unnoticed in laboratory freezers, mislabeled as contamination. What strikes observers most is Earth's resilience. No matter what happens, it rebuilds. Forests regrow, oceans circulate, species adapt. Even if civilizations burn themselves out, the planet folds those events into its memory, heals, and moves forward. To Earth, a few thousand years is a heartbeat. That might explain why it forgets so easily, why evidence of earlier worlds remains so faint. time smooths everything down until only the shape of the story remains. But shapes can still be recognized even when names and faces are gone. In this sense, Earth's memory connects us to any who came before. It holds the continuity of the human impulse to build, to question, to survive. Every mine, every quarry, every fossil bed we open is a conversation with the past. We're reading its thoughts one layer at a time and leaving our own notes as we go. The dialogue never stops, it just changes speakers. And, while the planet's memory is mostly impartial, it has moods. There are calm periods, long epochs of balance, and moments of violent correction. Extinctions, floods, quakes, fires. Civilizations rise in the quiet spaces between those corrections. They flourish when Earth is calm and vanish when it turns the page. If that rhythm has repeated for millions of years, then memory of the first civilization might simply be buried under too many revisions to see clearly. But like faint handwriting beneath new ink, traces can still be detected with proper tools. We've begun developing those tools: isotope analysis, deep radar imaging, sediment core sampling, DNA reconstruction. Each represents a way of translating the planet's silent archive. We're discovering that Earth records everything, even something like emotions, stress in trees, trauma in coral, resilience in soil. If a society once reshaped the world through farming, mining, or building, the soil would reflect it. If they altered the atmosphere, ice would capture it. The planet doesn't play favorites. It keeps everything. And so the question remains, if Earth remembers everything, what is it trying to tell us now? Perhaps that we're not unique, that others have walked this same path, faced identical choices, reached similar heights. Or perhaps it's reminding us that forgetting is part of the cycle too, that even memory must erode for new life to grow. Our own search for ancient civilizations is itself an act of planetary memory. We're helping Earth remember itself, piecing together fragments it has hidden, giving voice to layers that can't speak on their own. Whether or not those layers describe a lost civilization, they tell us something profound, that nothing truly disappears here. Everything becomes part of something else. And maybe that's what the first civilization understood, that the real monument isn't what you build, but what you leave embedded in the world itself. The soil under our feet could still carry their imprint, not as ruins, but as balance, as order, as a faint rhythm that guided them once and guides us now. As we listen to that rhythm, the next step becomes clear. If the planet keeps its memories in stone and sediment, then the stories of those who came before might still echo in legend, in myths that survived when everything else was lost. Those stories might not be fiction at all, but translations of geological memory into human language. And when science meets those legends, we might begin recognizing the truth hidden between them, written in a language older than words. Chapter 6. When Legend Meets Evidence. Throughout recorded history, every culture has preserved stories about how the world began and how it ended once before. They tell of catastrophic floods, of purifying fires, of cities that vanished beneath waves, of wise teachers who arrived bearing knowledge to rebuild what was lost. For centuries, scholars treated these as allegorical fantasies, moral lessons wrapped in mythological language. Yet, as our tools grow sharper and our understanding of planetary history deepens, something remarkable keeps happening. The old stories start sounding less like imagination and more like memory. Not that myth and science suddenly agree. They speak fundamentally different languages. Science works in data and verification. Myth works in metaphor and emotion. But both attempt to describe the same world, the same events. And sometimes, when we listen carefully to what ancient stories actually say, we find they've been describing geological or astronomical truths all along, just in forms early humans could understand and remember. For centuries, scholars dismissed the global flood myths as universal fantasy. Nearly every ancient society possessed one, the deluge that wiped the world clean, sparing only chosen survivors. But in recent decades, geologists confirmed that massive floods did indeed reshape the planet as the last ice age ended. Sea levels rose more than 100 meters. Glacial lakes burst through ice dams, carving canyons overnight. In the Pacific Northwest, the Caspian region, and the Black Sea Basin, sudden inundations transformed entire landscapes within generations. If you lived through something like that, your descendants would certainly remember. They might call it divine judgment, or cosmic renewal, or a cleansing of corruption. The myth preserves the memory even when precise details fade. The Mesopotamian story of Utnapishtim, written thousands of years before biblical Noah, describes the same catastrophe. The ark, the birds sent to find land, the mountaintop where the vessel finally rested. The Sumerians, Babylonians, and Hebrews all told variations of this tale, echoing what may have been a real regional flood amplified into cosmic significance. Farther east, Hindu texts speak of Manu, warned by a fish about coming deluge. In Greece, Deucalion survived a flood sent by Zeus to cleanse humanity. In China, Yu the Great tamed waters after they swallowed the land. On the other side of the world, Native American and Aboriginal Australian stories recall great floods that destroyed earlier worlds. These myths, separated by continents and oceans, align in theme and timing. They may not describe a single event, but they remember the same pattern, the planet changing suddenly. Civilization struggling to survive. When science finally confirmed that sea levels rose catastrophically around 12,000 years ago, myth and geology quietly acknowledged each other. One was story told in symbols, the other data written in sediment. Both described the same transformation. That's when researchers began examining other myths not as fiction, but as cultural records of real events, filtered through time. Volcanoes, for example, inspired countless legends of gods dwelling beneath mountains. The Greek Hephaestus, the Polynesian Pele, the Japanese Kagutsuchi, all fiery deities born of eruption. When archaeologists studied timelines of ancient eruptions, they found that many coincided with the earliest versions of these myths. Whole civilizations watched mountains explode, ash darkening skies, earth trembling beneath their feet. Without modern instruments, myth became their science, their way of understanding forces beyond control. In that sense, those stories aren't wrong. They're eyewitness accounts translated into the language of reverence and wonder. Even celestial myths often hold surprising accuracy. Ancient peoples described movements of stars, planets, and comets with poetic precision that modern astronomy confirms. In Australia, Aboriginal constellations align with seasonal cycles still relevant to navigation and agriculture. In the Americas, Mayan astronomers tracked Venus and Mars so precisely that their calendars rival modern calculations. Greek myths about Orion, Perseus, and Andromeda preserve constellation arrangements as they appeared thousands of years ago. When we decode them with astronomical software, we realize those stories were timestamps, oral records of the night sky frozen in mythic form. There's also the persistent question of lost lands, perhaps the most enduring theme of all: Atlantis, Lemuria, Mu, names carrying weight of nostalgia for forgotten worlds. Plato's tale of Atlantis remains most famous, but his version wasn't the first. Many earlier cultures told similar stories of island empires destroyed by water or fire. What fascinates researchers is that these legends often point to periods of real geological upheaval, times when entire regions did in fact sink beneath rising seas. The Sunda Shelf in Southeast Asia, the Caribbean Basin, the North Atlantic Ridge, all once hosted vast coastal plains now drowned. When the Ice Age ended, those lands vanished within generations. Survivors would have watched their world collapse into the sea. In myth, they became ancestors of new peoples, carrying fragments of lost knowledge inland. Of course, not every legend corresponds neatly to scientific events. Some are layers of imagination built atop older truths. But the pattern exists. Myth tends to preserve memory long after physical evidence disappears. Oral cultures especially use story as a way to encode practical knowledge. A tale about a serpent in the river might warn of dangerous currents. A god who punishes hubris might be metaphor for natural balance. And a myth about a vanished golden age could be distant recollection of real prosperity before catastrophe struck. Science approaches these stories cautiously, not to confirm them literally, but to see what they reveal about human observation. Studies of Aboriginal Australian myths show they accurately describe coastlines as they were 12,000 years ago, before rising seas redrew them. Those stories have been passed down unbroken for hundreds of generations, an oral record of geological change unmatched by any written chronicle. Similarly, Polynesian navigation chants encode detailed star maps and ocean routes. When anthropologists compared them to modern GPS data, they found remarkable consistency. These weren't primitive fictions, but tools for survival, knowledge disguised as narrative. What happens when myth and science meet in the middle, when each helps the other remember? It becomes a dialogue across time. Science brings instruments. Myth brings continuity. One provides measurement, the other meaning. Together, they allow us to see that history is not a straight line, but a braid of observation. Disaster and recollection. In recent years, researchers in archaeology, climatology, and anthropology have begun collaborating with storytellers and elders from indigenous cultures to reconstruct local histories. In doing so, they've confirmed details once thought impossible. Volcanic eruptions dated to the exact generation preserved in myth. Coastlines remembered from when they lay far offshore. Star positions described precisely as they appeared millennia ago. Myth, it seems, is a resilient form of data compression. It stores information in rhythm, image, and repetition, the way memory naturally prefers. Sometimes the overlap between myth and evidence becomes difficult to explain through coincidence alone. Certain stories mention stars or celestial events, corresponding to positions we can now date astronomically, positions that haven't existed for tens of thousands of years. The Egyptian myth of Osiris and Isis mirrors the rising of Orion's belt in Sirius at a time far earlier than Egypt's official history. In South America, Inca myths of Viracocha describe a god emerging after a great flood to teach people architecture and astronomy, remarkably similar to Mesopotamian tales of Oannes, who did the same on the other side of the world. These parallels may simply reflect the universal human impulse to explain civilization as a gift from beyond. But they could also hint that both regions inherited the same story from a deeper, older source. The idea that memory can survive in story longer than in stone isn't hard to grasp. Language evolves slowly, but emotion, awe, fear, reverence carries messages intact. When entire generations repeat a story every season, it becomes self-preserving. A single detail, like the timing of the stars or the sound of the sea, can stay accurate for thousands of years because the story depends on it. Myth keeps facts alive without ever calling them facts. Some scientists resist this blending of myth and evidence, and rightly so. The line between pattern recognition and imagination is thin. Yet it's also true that myth often guides discovery. Heinrich Schliemann found Troy by following Homer's verses. Archaeologists in Crete used legends of Minos to uncover the Palace of Knossos. Even the search for meteor impacts and ancient craters has been guided by indigenous tales describing fire from the sky. Each time, myth pointed the way long before data confirmed it. Perhaps what's happening is not that myth predicts science, but that both draw from the same underlying reality, one emotional, one analytical. Earth experiences an event. Humanity interprets it. The story lasts longer than the evidence, so when science finally catches up, it feels like rediscovery. If a first civilization once existed, its legacy might live not in surviving structures, but in myths that refuse to die. Over millennia, their details would shift. Their heroes change names, their geography blur. Yet the core idea, a lost world of knowledge destroyed by disaster, would persist. Atlantis might be just one version of that recurring theme, a symbolic stand-in for every civilization the planet has forgotten. The myth survives because it speaks to something universal, the fear of loss and the longing to remember. In this way, science and legend become two halves of the same act of remembrance. Science digs downward, peeling back layers of earth and ice. Legend moves upward, carrying meaning through generations. Where they meet, the past briefly becomes visible again, like a reflection on still water. For a moment, we can see both what was real and what was remembered, overlapping perfectly. And when that happens, something subtle shifts. The question changes from, did this really happen? To what are we remembering? Maybe the stories we call myths are humanity's version of Earth's geological record, an emotional sediment built up over time. Just as rocks preserve eruptions and extinctions, stories preserve fears, triumphs, and discoveries. Both are records of experience, one written in stone, the other in language. As we continue exploring this intersection, we start to realize that the border between history and myth is porous. Every scientific discovery about our ancient past seems to echo something already whispered by old stories. The flood, the lost land, the sky gods, the rebirth of civilization, all part of the same cycle, repeated in human and planetary memory alike. So perhaps the real task isn't to separate science from legend, but to let them inform each other. Science keeps us honest. Legend keeps us connected. The first looks outward for proof, the second inward for continuity. Together they might help us glimpse the whole truth, a truth that includes both the physical world and the emotional one, the evidence we can measure and the memory we can feel. And as this quiet investigation continues, as we trace the fingerprints of lost ages through both data and story, another question emerges. If ancient myths preserve real memories, then what else might they contain? Could they hold instructions, fragments of knowledge meant to survive even when everything else fell apart? If so, then perhaps those ancient builders, those vanished teachers, left more than ruins and legends. Maybe they left blueprints, ideas embedded in myth and symbol, waiting for us to decode them. That is where the path leads next, toward the idea that those who came before might have been more than storytellers. They may have been engineers, scientists, astronomers, and philosophers whose work still influences us, hidden in plain sight. To find them, we'll have to look not in libraries or temples, but in the logic of the structures themselves, in technologies and methods that seem impossibly advanced for their age. Chapter 7. The Lost Engineers. The more deeply we examine ruins from the ancient world, the more they begin feeling less like remnants and more like riddles. They possess a precision, an endurance, a deliberateness that refuses dismissal as primitive handiwork. Yet, according to everything we've been taught about history, they shouldn't exist in the form they do. The question hanging quietly behind them isn't just who built this, or why, but rather how. That simple word carries centuries of wonder. How did our ancestors move 100-ton blocks of stone without cranes or engines? How did they cut granite as if it were soft clay? How did they design structures so perfectly aligned that even modern engineers hesitate to replicate them? The answers we've offered over the years have ranged from imaginative to mathematical, from mythological to physical. Some explanations invoke lost technologies. Others credit the ingenuity of mass labor and careful observation. But as we look closer, the puzzle doesn't shrink, it deepens. Each discovery reveals sophistication that seems mismatched with the era we've assigned it. Maybe we've underestimated how capable ancient people were. Or maybe, just maybe, they were inheriting methods from those who came before them. The phrase, forgotten engineers, doesn't require aliens or supernatural intervention. It could mean something simpler and, in a way, more astonishing. Humans just like us who mastered techniques and principles that later generations lost. Civilization isn't a straight line. It's a series of rises and falls. Knowledge grows, collapses, and grows again, like waves erasing and redrawing the shoreline. The first engineers might not have been the first humans, but the first to think of Earth itself as something that could be shaped with purpose and precision. When you walk through the ruins of places like Baalbek in Lebanon, you feel that presence immediately. The temple complex there sits atop massive stone foundations, some weighing over 1,000 tons each. The largest, known as the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, lies partly quarried, still attached to bedrock. Even with modern equipment, lifting such blocks would be monumentally challenging. Yet someone thousands of years ago not only carved them, but placed them precisely into the foundation with near-perfect leveling. The Romans later built temples on this platform, but even they seem to have treated the older stones as mysteries, relics of an earlier age they could admire, but not fully replicate. Similar feats appear worldwide. In Egypt, the granite blocks of the Great Pyramid's King's Chamber fit so snugly that you can't slide paper between them. In Peru, at Sacsayhuaman, irregular stones interlock like puzzle pieces, each face carved with subtle curvature that matches its neighbors exactly. At Pumapunku, massive andesite blocks feature intricate grooves, channels, and right angles as if shaped by precision machinery. In India, ancient stepwells of Gujarat descend hundreds of feet underground in symmetrical spirals that still stand perfectly balanced after 1,000 years of earthquakes. In Cambodia, Angkor Wat's stone blocks, hauled from miles away, fit together so precisely that mortar was unnecessary. None of these places share culture or chronology, yet they share precision. A universal signature of builders who understood something fundamental about weight, pressure, and material behavior. When engineers today analyze those works, they notice details beyond artistry. The stones aren't randomly placed. They're tuned, Some seem positioned to distribute seismic stress, others to manage water flow, others to resist erosion. It's as if their builders knew that structures must adapt to the planet's movements. In Japan and South America, certain megalithic sites employ similar polygonal masonry, interlocking irregular blocks that flex slightly during earthquakes, preventing collapse. That's not guesswork. It's engineering insight. And the fact that it appears on opposite sides of the world suggests either shared heritage or shared rediscovery of the same principle. Another forgotten technique involves acoustic design. Many ancient temples amplify or resonate sound in ways suggesting intentional tuning. The hypogeum of Halsaflieni in Malta, carved entirely underground over 5,000 years ago, vibrates at a frequency that affects the human body. When someone chants within it, the entire chamber hums, creating sensations that feel almost physical. In the Mayan pyramid of Kukulkan, a clap in front of the staircase produces an echo resembling the chirp of the sacred Quetzal bird, a sound effect engineered by its stepped geometry. Egyptian chambers. Incan walls, even stone circles in Britain, display similar acoustic awareness. These were not accidental quirks of architecture, but deliberate choices made by builders who understood how sound moves through space. This raises the question, how did they learn it? Without formal science, without written acoustics or physics, how did they refine such precision? The simplest answer is experimentation. Generations of builders learning through observation. But that kind of experimentation requires continuity, a stable tradition of knowledge passed down unbroken. History shows how easily such continuity breaks. Libraries burn, empires collapse, oral traditions fade. What if the original source of that knowledge predates the cultures we credit with it? Even more mysterious are the tools themselves, or rather, their absence. Archaeologists have found copper chisels near Egyptian quarries, yet granite's hardness would dull those instantly. At sites like Giza and Aswan, perfectly straight cuts and boreholes appear in stone that would require diamond-tipped tools or mechanical drills today. The precision of these cuts, smooth, uniform, spiraled, doesn't match what copper or simple abrasion could achieve. Theories range from lost alloys to unknown techniques involving vibrational sound. In some experiments, modern researchers have used acoustic, levitation, or ultrasonic cutting to shape stone with minimal friction. It's tempting to imagine that the ancients might have discovered simpler versions of these methods, techniques, efficient enough to leave little trace, forgotten after catastrophe or disuse. Ancient engineering also shows understanding of geography and astronomy that feels almost scientific. The builders of Giza, for example, aligned their monuments not only to cardinal directions, but to positions of stars that would have been visible 12,000 years ago. The layout of the pyramids mirrors Orion's belt. The Nile's curve matches the Milky Way's. In South America, lines and monuments align to solstices, lunar cycles, even magnetic north. These alignments suggest an awareness of the planet as a system, a structure that moves, breathes, and cycles. That kind of awareness usually comes only after long observation or inherited charts. In many ancient myths, knowledge is said to come from those who came before. Gods, sages, builders, or teachers, figures who arrive after disaster to restore order. The Sumerians credited the Anunnaki. The Egyptians honored Thoth. The Maya revered Kukulkan. The Inca worshipped Viracocha. Each culture described these beings as wise, human-like, and technologically advanced. They taught agriculture, writing, mathematics, and building. They didn't conquer. They instructed. Whether literal or symbolic, these stories might describe the same historical phenomenon. A remnant population of skilled survivors spreading knowledge after a collapse. To later peoples, their mastery would appear divine. That's the haunting idea behind the forgotten engineers. That what we call the beginning of civilization was actually a reboot, a rediscovery of knowledge once widespread, but then scattered. If an earlier civilization fell, it might have left behind travelers, builders, astronomers, healers who passed fragments of understanding to hunter-gatherers who came after. Those fragments became myth, ritual, and architecture. Over generations, the techniques survived, but their origins faded. The students forgot the names of their teachers. In modern times, we see this process happening in smaller ways. When an ancient technology is lost, Roman concrete, Damascus steel, Greek fire, it's not because the knowledge was impossible, but because it was fragile. It depended on specific materials. conditions, and secrets guarded by small groups. Once those groups disappeared, so did the craft. Multiply that by millennia, and it's easy to imagine entire sciences evaporating after a global catastrophe. If such engineers existed before us, they might have left their signatures not just in structures, but in design principles that endure subconsciously. Geometry, symmetry, harmonic ratios all seem innate to human creativity. We find them beautiful without always knowing why. The golden ratio appears in ancient temples, Renaissance art, and modern architecture alike. It might be instinct, or it might be inheritance, the echo of lessons learned so long ago that they've become part of our intuition. Even agriculture shows signs of forgotten engineering. The world's oldest known irrigation systems in Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley demonstrate understanding of hydraulics and soil chemistry. Terrace farming in the Andes uses designs that regulate temperature and moisture through microclimates, an efficiency hard to improve upon even today. Some ancient wells in India still draw clean water through systems of filtration built into their stone linings. These are not the works of trial and error alone. They are optimized. They suggest testing, iteration, and data, though their data was measured in seasons, not spreadsheets. When we look at the past through this lens, we see not mystery for mystery's sake, but continuity. The same curiosity that drives modern science drove ancient builders. The same desire to make things last, to understand nature, to balance form and function. The forgotten engineers might not have vanished completely. Their knowledge might have diffused into the DNA of civilization itself. There's another possibility, quieter but equally profound. Maybe the first engineers didn't use technology as we define it. Maybe their mastery lay in understanding natural forces so deeply that they could work with them instead of against them. They might have used sound to move stone, resonance to shape materials, or magnetism to guide design. Such methods would leave almost no physical residue, but their results could endure for millennia. Modern science has begun exploring these possibilities, from the resonant frequencies of minerals to the potential for low-energy shaping techniques. Each discovery brings us a step closer to understanding how the ancients might have achieved what they did without the tools we expect. If we could speak to them now, perhaps they'd tell us that technology doesn't have to mean machines, that progress doesn't always require steel. It can mean harmony, using the rhythms of the planet as tools. Their legacy might not be lost inventions, but the philosophy behind them, that the earth itself is an instrument, and those who learn its tones can build anything. We tend to think of progress as linear, but maybe it's cyclical. Maybe the forgotten engineers weren't the first, just the latest in a repeating pattern. Every few ages, knowledge accumulates, reaches a peak, then resets. The next generation rediscovers it, calling it new. The builders of tomorrow might look back at our skyscrapers and wonder the same thing we wonder about theirs. How did they do it? Even now, echoes of their work remain underfoot, in stones that defy erosion, in walls that hum with sound, in alignments that track stars no longer visible. Each structure is a quiet message across time, saying that intelligence has walked here before. We may not know their names or languages, but we know their thoughts. They wanted permanence in an impermanent world. They wanted to leave something that would outlast memory. As we study their work, we're not just solving engineering puzzles. We're remembering a relationship with the Earth that they might have understood better than we do. One that treats construction as collaboration, not domination. That understanding could be their true legacy, the lesson buried beneath all the stone and myth. And as we follow their traces, the question deepens. If they built with such foresight, did they know what would come? Did they leave messages for us? Not warnings carved in words, but patterns, alignments, and codes meant to be found when we were ready to see them? Chapter 8. Messages in Stone. If you wanted to speak to the future, not to someone a year or decade from now, but to minds thousands of years ahead, how would you do it? People who won't share your language, your symbols, perhaps not even your form of consciousness. How would you send a message across that kind of temporal chasm? A book would decay within centuries. A recording would corrode. A satellite would drift and fall. Even the most durable materials eventually crumble under time's patient pressure. The only real medium that endures is the earth itself. Stone, soil, geometry, and sky. Perhaps that's why the ancients chose them. Not just to build, but to speak. If a first civilization existed, and foresaw its own end, it might have tried to leave something behind. Not monuments for worship, but instructions or reminders. It might have known that its knowledge would fade, that memory would break, and that someday another people would rise and look for meaning in the ruins. To reach them, the builders would need a universal language, one that doesn't depend on words. Mathematics, proportion, and pattern would become their alphabet. Across the world, ancient monuments seem to carry the same message. Pay attention to the sky, to the cycles, to the balance of Earth and stars. The Great Pyramid points almost perfectly north, aligning with the planet's axis, as though declaring, "Here is the center of understanding." The Mayan temples chart the equinoxes, telling future generations when the world turns. Stone circles mark the solstices, reminding us that time itself can be measured without clocks. These aren't coincidences. They are teachings frozen in architecture. Every alignment, every ratio, every shadow cast at a certain moment of the year is a form of communication. A message saying, "We knew this. We wanted you to know it too." Some scholars see the world's ancient monuments as part of a planetary network, each contributing a piece to a larger map. The Nazca lines in Peru, visible only from above, form geometric patterns and animal shapes stretching for kilometers across the desert. The scale makes little sense unless seen from the air, which has led to endless speculation. But perhaps they weren't meant to be seen by gods or pilots. Perhaps they were made to endure, vast and simple, resistant to erosion, their purpose clear only when technology existed again to view them from the sky. Maybe the builders knew that time would eventually give us that perspective. Even the layout of ancient sites suggests intentional communication. Giza's pyramids mirror. Orion's belt, the same pattern echoed in monuments. Across the globe, some researchers propose that these alignments were not just symbolic, but literal markers meant to synchronize earthly coordinates with celestial ones. The message in that case wouldn't be, "We worship the stars," but "We understood the system." A civilization capable of such synchronization was effectively leaving behind a cosmic address, a fixed point in the vast turning of time. If we take that idea seriously, then ancient monuments could be more than tombs or temples. They could be memory devices, ways of storing knowledge physically in relationships between shape and proportion. The Great Pyramid, for instance, encodes mathematical constants, p, phi, Earth's circumference, even the ratio of its distance to the sun. Whether by coincidence or design, these relationships suggest a deliberate attempt to connect architecture to universal measurements. Whoever designed it seemed to know that certain numbers never change, that they would mean the same thing to any intelligent being, no matter the era. That's what makes them ideal carriers of information. Modern scientists have tried similar approaches. When we sent the Voyager probes into space, we attached golden records carrying basic information about Earth. Our location in relation to pulsars, a map of our solar system, the composition of our atmosphere, sounds of our world. All of it was encoded in mathematics and physical constants, the only language we expect alien minds to understand. Now, imagine a civilization doing the same on Earth, not through spacecraft, but through stone. They might have embedded the same principles, planetary data, astronomical ratios, constants of physics, into monuments meant to last through cataclysm. What makes this idea compelling is that we already see hints of it. Many ancient temples, pyramids, and megaliths incorporate ratios that reflect planetary orbits, the tilt of Earth, and lunar cycles. The builders didn't just align their structures with stars. They embedded celestial mechanics into the dimensions themselves. The result is architecture that doubles as a textbook, teaching through form rather than inscription. Even if language vanished, the lesson would survive. Some monuments might even encode time itself. The Mayan long count calendar measures vast cycles known as baktuns, totaling over 5,000 years each. The builders of Angkor Wat used similar numerical symbolism tied to astronomical ages. In Egypt, the Sphinx faces due east, greeting the rising sun as it moves through the zodiac over millennia. Each alignment changes slowly with the precession of the equinoxes, as if the monument were a clock designed to tick once every 26,000 years. Such precision suggests a message meant not for immediate use but for distant descendants, perhaps a way to mark when the next great cycle or catastrophe would occur. Even the myths accompanying These structures often sound like instructions disguised as stories. The Egyptian Book of the Dead describes how the soul must navigate a series of gates and tests before reaching eternity, each one corresponding to real constellations and physical directions. The Mayan Popol Vuh speaks of creation and destruction cycles echoing the same astronomical patterns. In India, the Vedas encode astronomical data within mythic narrative. Deities representing planets, battles symbolizing solstices and eclipses. These aren't random correlations. They suggest that myths, monuments, and mathematics once worked together as one system, a way of recording and transmitting cosmic knowledge through generations. But if these were messages, who were they meant for? Some say the gods, others the dead, others future humans. Maybe all three mean the same thing. Gods might simply mean those yet to come, the future itself. The builders might have known that their civilization would fall, but trusted that another would rise. They couldn't preserve their words, but they could preserve their understanding. In that sense, every monument becomes a letter to whoever finds it next, saying, "We were here. We learned this much. Don't forget." This kind of message doesn't need to be obvious. In fact, subtlety might be the point. If the goal was to ensure that only a society advanced enough to rediscover scientific knowledge could understand the message, then it would make sense to encode it in complex geometry. A primitive culture might see a temple. A future civilization might see a map of the heavens, a model of orbital resonance, or a warning about cycles of catastrophe. It's the same logic we use today when designing nuclear waste warnings, symbols, meant to say danger to civilizations that might exist tens of thousands of years from now. The message isn't in the words but in universal patterns of shape and caution. In a way, those ancient builders might have been facing the same question we do now. How do you make knowledge last? We try to store ours in digital form, a fragile method compared to stone. A single solar flare or shift in magnetic field could erase our entire archive. But geometry doesn't need electricity. Stone doesn't need maintenance. The message they left, if it exists, was designed to outlast every language, every empire, every species. It's possible that we're already decoding it without realizing it. Every time we measure an ancient monument and find its astronomical precision, we're reading part of their sentence. Every time we find the same ratio repeated across continents, we're hearing their emphasis. Each discovery brings us closer to understanding what they were trying to say. Maybe their message wasn't about survival or catastrophe, but about continuity, about the idea that knowledge, once found, should never truly be lost again. Some believe the Earth itself is part of the message, that these ancient structures placed along fault lines, magnetic nodes, and latitude harmonics were designed to stabilize or harmonize the planet's energy, an early form of geoengineering rooted in balance rather than control. It's hard to prove, but the thought is intriguing. It suggests a worldview where architecture isn't just physical, but ecological, where every design participates in the rhythm of the planet. If true, then their message to us might be simple. Remember how to build with nature, not against it. In our own time, we've begun rediscovering the need for that wisdom. Modern engineers study ancient architecture to learn why it survives earthquakes and floods better than many contemporary buildings. Scientists analyze Roman concrete to understand how it self-heals through mineral reactions. Farmers return to ancient irrigation techniques that waste no water. Every rediscovery is a reply to the messages left long ago, not in words, but in enduring design. If the first civilization did leave something intentional, maybe it wasn't one monument or one code. Maybe it was the pattern itself, the global network of sites, all built to echo the same principles. Taken together, they form a kind of planetary inscription, too large to see from the ground, visible only when we map the entire Earth. In that sense, the message might be, look at the whole. Don't study one ruin in isolation. Connect them. When you do, the pattern emerges. And what does that pattern say? Perhaps it says that the universe operates on cycles, that civilizations rise and fall with the rhythm of Earth's heartbeat, and that each one leaves clues for the next. Maybe it says that intelligence is not an endpoint, but a process, something the planet itself keeps rediscovering through us. The builders might have understood that they couldn't stop time, but they could synchronize with it, and by doing so, leave behind a map, not of space, but of wisdom. There's another way to read their message. Maybe they weren't speaking to us at all, but to themselves, to the future version of their own kind after the next reset. Perhaps they knew the world would change, seas would rise, memory would fade, and humanity would forget. So they built reminders, hoping that when civilization rose again, someone would recognize the pattern, feel that strange familiarity, and realize that this has all happened before. It's not a warning or prophecy. It's a reassurance that forgetting is temporary, that knowledge always returns. When you think about it, we're doing the same thing right now. Our satellites, our probes, our archives, our digital clouds, all are messages to the future or to whoever might find them. We too are carving our understanding into the fabric of the planet, in data and infrastructure instead of stone. Maybe that's just what intelligent species do. They build to remember, and just like those who came before, we can't be sure who will receive our message or whether they'll understand it. If the ancient builders could see us now, studying their works with lasers and drones, rediscovering the alignments they designed, maybe they'd feel the satisfaction of being heard. The communication worked. It just took 12,000 years for the reply to arrive. As we continue listening, we begin to sense that their messages might not have been technical at all. They might have been philosophical. Their true meaning might not be, we had advanced knowledge, but we understood our place. Every monument, every line, every alignment might be reminding us of something simple and profound, that we are part of a much larger system, and that harmony between earth, sky, and mind is the only form of permanence. And maybe that's the message that matters most. Because after all the decoding, after all the theories and debates, what remains constant is this: they wanted to be remembered. And they wanted us to remember something about ourselves. Perhaps that we too are temporary, but capable of greatness. That the world will forget our names, but remember our patterns. That the knowledge we leave behind will someday awaken in others, just as theirs has awakened in us. Chapter 9. The Great Silence. When a civilization ends, it doesn't happen all at once. The world doesn't stop turning. The stars don't blink out. The air doesn't grow still. What fades first is the noise, the hum of creation, the rhythm of work, the steady pulse of thought that once connected thousands of minds moving toward a shared purpose. Silence comes slowly, like dusk spreading across a landscape. It arrives in moments too quiet to notice: a workshop abandoned, a library left locked, a bridge that no one repairs. And then one morning, the city wakes for the last time and doesn't know it. Every civilization in history has experienced some version of this silence. The Maya, whose calendars measured epochs, saw their cities swallowed by jungle. The Romans, who believed their empire eternal, left amphitheaters to crumble into earth. The Indus Valley people, whose streets were so well planned that modern engineers still study them, vanished with barely a trace. None of them believed it would end. No one ever does. Yet the silence always comes. What makes the silence so complete is not destruction, but forgetting. The physical remains persist: stone, pottery, a few carvings. But the knowledge of what they meant fades. The people who come after find the ruins and give them new names. A temple becomes a tomb. A machine becomes a shrine. Over generations, the true purpose of the structure dissolves, replaced by myth and wonder. In that transformation, something both dies and is reborn. The past becomes legend, and silence becomes mystery. If a civilization existed before all others, the first, the one that may have left clues scattered across the world, then its silence must have been immense. It would have been the silence of a planet resetting itself, of oceans rising, of skies darkening, of cities erased. To imagine it is to imagine time itself pausing for breath. What kind of world would that have been? How much would it take to erase nearly every trace of an advanced society? Perhaps not as much as we think. Earth is efficient at forgetting. Within a few hundred years, nature reclaims everything. Roads crumble, forests return, metal rusts, glass turns to dust. In 10,000 years, almost nothing we've built would remain recognizable. Even our tallest towers would be reduced to mounds of debris, buried under new soil. In 100,000 years, the continents themselves would have shifted. Ice, wind, and water would erase all sign that we were ever here. Only the most durable materials, stone and a few metals, might survive, and even those would be worn smooth. It's humbling to realize that the silence of the earth is not empty. It's patient. The planet waits for noise to return. When the first civilization fell, if it did, the silence that followed might have lasted thousands of years. Forests grew over ruins, rivers changed course, the climate warmed and cooled. Life went on, indifferent. And when new humans emerged, they found a world already old. A landscape full of shapes that didn't make sense. They might have seen those remnants and wondered who built them. They might have built their own cities on top of older ones, never knowing they were walking on the foundations of memory. Archaeologists have a phrase for this layering of history, the palimpsest. It means something written, erased and written over again, but still faintly showing the marks of what came before. Earth is one vast palimpsest. Every civilization has written its chapter on the same pages, and each has believed it was the first. The silence between those chapters isn't absence, it's waiting. Earth holds on to the echoes until someone learns to listen again. What would that silence have felt like to those who lived through it? Imagine being one of the last survivors of a world collapsing. The sky changing color, the seasons no longer predictable, the coastlines retreating every year. Imagine carrying fragments of knowledge you can no longer use, formulas for metals that no longer exist, maps of stars obscured by ash, memories of machines that no longer function. You would tell your children what you could, but without the tools or context, those explanations would turn into stories. The world was once full of light, you'd say. Our ancestors could speak to the sky. And over generations, those descriptions would transform into myths of gods and magic. The silence would not be empty, but full of half-remembered words, echoing into the next dawn. In many ways, we live in that echo still. Every flood myth, every legend of a golden age, every tale of gods descending to teach humanity could be the voice of that silence speaking to us through memory. The long quiet between civilizations doesn't erase knowledge entirely. It distills it. The facts become symbols. The equations become rituals. The technologies become stories about power and balance. And when a new civilization arises, those symbols inspire curiosity again. The cycle renews. We tend to think of silence as loss, but it also creates space. Without it, there can be no rediscovery. The centuries after a collapse are like fallow ground. Time for the planet to heal. For the next generation to begin with fresh soil. The silence of the earth is not punishment. It's restoration. Even after the greatest catastrophes, life begins again. The coral returns to reefs. Trees grow over ruins. The air clears. The planet forgets the noise, but keeps the lessons hidden in its layers. Perhaps that's why the clues left by a possible first civilization are so faint. They might not have been erased in anger, but gently absorbed by time. Their silence was not forced but chosen. If they foresaw the end, they might have accepted it, knowing that everything must rest before it rises again. They might have trusted that the essence of their knowledge, the part that matters most, would survive in the patterns of nature. In the instincts of humanity, in the rhythm of the world itself. The silence between civilizations might even be necessary. It's what prevents knowledge from becoming arrogance. Every rise carries pride. Every fall brings humility. When silence comes, it humbles the planet and resets the scale of meaning. The builders vanish, but their influence remains, waiting for the next generation to discover it anew and to marvel as if it were the first time. Modern scientists sometimes talk about the Great Filter, the idea that in the vast universe, civilizations might destroy themselves before they can spread too far. On Earth, the Great Filter might simply be silence, a period of forgetting built into the rhythm of intelligence. It ensures that no species holds power forever. It enforces balance. It teaches in the most absolute way that survival depends on cooperation with the planet rather than domination over it. And maybe that's the reason silence is sacred in so many cultures. The gaps between sounds are where meaning lives. The pause in music gives the note shape. The stillness before speech carries anticipation. Silence isn't absence, it's potential. For the first civilization, it might have been the same. Their fall, their vanishing, might not have been defeat, but transformation, a way to pass the torch without forcing the flame. When we look at the ruins of ancient worlds, we often feel a kind of sadness, as though mourning the loss of brilliance. But maybe the Earth doesn't see it that way. Maybe it sees continuity. Each silence a pause between verses in the same long song. The first civilization's silence became the background upon which ours was written. The patterns they left, the monuments, the myths, all echo still, resonating faintly beneath our own melody. In our time, we can already sense how fragile our noise is. The hum of machines, the glow of cities, the pulse of communication. It feels permanent, but it's just another verse. If the power stopped tomorrow, if the grids went dark, the silence would come back fast. Within days, the sky would grow clearer, the stars sharper. Within months, grass would split the pavement. Within years, the forest would take back the roads. The planet doesn't need to lift a finger. It just waits. Silence is its default state. But the thought doesn't have to be frightening. In fact, it's strangely comforting. The silence that follows is also renewal. It means the story isn't over, just changing hands. Earth doesn't destroy. It resets. And every silence carries within it the potential for memory to return in a new form. We might be the noise that fills the latest silence. Our technology, our science, our art. All of it could be Earth remembering itself again, speaking through us as it has before. The same impulse that built the pyramids now builds satellites. The same curiosity that mapped the stars in stone now maps them in data. We are part of the same conversation, just another voice after a long pause. The first civilization's silence might not have been a void, but a whisper, one that continues through the patterns we keep rediscovering. When we align our monuments to the stars, when we study ancient myths for hidden truths, when we listen to the planet's deep rhythms, we're answering that whisper. We're continuing the dialogue. And someday, we too will fall quiet. Our cities will fade. Our data will vanish. Our monuments will crumble. The silence will return. But if we've learned anything from those who came before, it's that silence doesn't mean the end. It means that Earth is preparing to speak again, in a new voice, through new hands, somewhere deep underground or beneath the sea. The record of our time will settle into the planet's memory. A thin layer of chemical signatures, a dusting of artifacts, a few stubborn structures that resist decay. One day, far in the future, another civilization might find them and wonder who we were. They'll study our ruins, trace our alignments, decode our myths. They'll find patterns that feel strangely familiar. And when they do, they'll realize what we're realizing now, that we're all part of the same story. Told over and over, separated only by long silences. It's easy to think of silence as final, but maybe it's more like rest. The pause between breaths, the stillness before dawn. The first civilization's silence was deep but not empty. It was the seedbed for everything that followed. We are living proof that the silence worked, that memory returned, that knowledge can be reborn. And somewhere, perhaps even now, the next silence is waiting, patient as ever. Not a threat, but a promise that when our noise fades, Earth will listen, remember, and begin again. And so the story continues, softly. Through the spaces between what was said and what was left unsaid. Through the long quiet that always follows creation. Because in the end, silence isn't what happens when the story stops. It's what allows the next one to begin. Epilogue, the timeless conversation. There's a quiet dialogue that runs through history, older than language and wider than civilization. It isn't spoken aloud, yet it never truly stops. It's the conversation between humanity and Earth, between what is built and what endures, between memory and forgetting, between sound and silence, every stone set in place, every myth retold, every map drawn, and every question asked is part of that same exchange. We think of history as a timeline, but maybe it's more like an echo chamber. One voice fading as another rises, each calling out into time, each answering the last without realizing it. The searchers of today are only the latest speakers in that conversation. Before them were the architects of forgotten worlds, the storytellers who turned memory into myth, the survivors who carried fragments of truth through disaster. And before them, perhaps, the first civilization, whispering across the ages in geometry and stone. Every era thinks it's speaking for the first time, but in reality, it's continuing a dialogue that began long before history began to write itself. The conversation starts in curiosity, that simple, almost childlike question. What is this? And why does it exist? It's the same question that led the first humans to look at the stars, the same one that led ancient builders to carve rock into meaning, and the same one that leads modern scientists to peer into the universe. Curiosity is how Earth listens to itself through us. When we question the world, we're not standing outside it. We're part of its process of remembering. Each civilization adds its own vocabulary to this conversation. The first engineers spoke through structures, their grammar written in stone. The philosophers of Greece turned that grammar into logic. The scholars of the medieval world translated it into text. The scientists of the modern era express it in mathematics and experiment. And now our technology speaks in data, extending the conversation beyond the planet, out into the quiet vastness of space. The medium changes, but the intent doesn't. We're still trying to understand what the first builders might have understood. How to exist meaningfully in a universe that never stops moving. But conversation implies listening as much as speaking. And that's something our species often forgets. The ancients listened to the rhythm of seasons, the patterns of stars, the cycles of growth and decay. They learned from the landscape, adjusted to its moods, and built in harmony with its laws. Their communication with Earth was reciprocal. Somewhere along the way, that balance shifted. Our civilization speaks louder than any before, but listens less. Still, the conversation continues. Earth answers in its own language, in weather, in tides, in the chemistry of the air. It reminds us, gently at first, and more firmly later, that communication must be mutual. Floods, fires, droughts, all are forms of response, feedback in a dialogue we've been having for millennia. The first civilization may have understood that silence and listening were part of survival. Perhaps that's why their works are so aligned with planetary cycles, so tuned to its geometry. They weren't trying to conquer Earth. They were trying to stay in conversation with it. When modern scientists study those alignments, the way ancient structures point to the solstice sunrise or echo the moon's orbit, they're not just measuring architecture. They're measuring communication. Each alignment is a sentence in a language built of observation. It says, "We saw this pattern, and we made ourselves part of it." That's what makes these monuments timeless. They aren't merely records of what people knew. They're demonstrations of how to listen. Sometimes, when you stand in such a place at dawn on the equinox, or beneath a night sky untouched by modern light, you can almost feel the conversation resume. The air carries a kind of recognition, as though the stones remember being understood. You realize that what feels ancient isn't the structure itself, but the act of noticing. The moment when a mind connects with the pattern of the world is always new, no matter how old the pattern is. That's why the conversation never ends. It's rediscovered every time someone looks closely enough to hear it. The dialogue doesn't just flow through history. It flows through individuals. Every person who looks up at the stars and feels wonder is continuing it. Every scientist who tests a theory. Every artist who captures the shape of light. Every child who asks, why? They're all speaking the same language in different forms. Even when we don't realize it, we're responding to the same impulse that drove the first builders to align their monuments with the heavens. We're still saying, I see, I remember, I want to understand. If the first civilization truly existed, they might have known that the only way to make their message last was to weave it into the world itself. Not into fragile records, but into relationships between humans and Earth, between thought and pattern. That's why their conversation survives. It's encoded in instinct, in geometry, in story. We may have forgotten their words, but we still speak their grammar. We still feel the pull to build, to explore, to measure, to connect the ground beneath our feet with the stars above our heads. Even our modern technologies, advanced as they seem, are echoes of their methods. When we send probes to other planets, we engrave symbols and star maps on their hulls. When we construct observatories, we align them with celestial bodies. When we design data networks, we model them after natural systems. Each is a continuation of the same pattern, translating the universe into meaning and reflecting that meaning back into form. The conversation expands not through domination, but through resonance. It's easy to think of this dialogue as one-sided, as though we're the only ones speaking. But the planet participates too, in ways subtle and constant. Earth answers our questions through evidence: fossils, strata, weather, life. Every discovery, every revelation is its response. When a scientist finds an ancient tool beneath layers of sediment, it's as if Earth has handed over a memory, saying, "You were here once. You've always been here." When a telescope captures light from a star billions of years old, the universe itself is answering, "Yes, you are part of me." The conversation then isn't just between humans and Earth. It's between intelligence and existence, between awareness and everything that sustains it. The first civilization might have seen that more clearly than we do. Their monuments suggest a worldview in which knowledge and reverence were the same thing. To understand the cosmos was not to dissect it, but to harmonize with it. They spoke to the universe through mathematics and balance, trusting that those principles would carry across time, the closest thing to a universal language we have. Perhaps that's the real message encoded in their works, that the universe is meant to be spoken with, not just studied, that to listen deeply is itself a form of participation. When the builders aligned their temples to stars, they weren't just observing the heavens. They were greeting them, continuing a dialogue that began when the first spark of awareness appeared on this planet. The silence that followed their fall was not the end of that conversation, just a pause. Every silence since has been another pause, a chance for Earth to rest, for memory to gather its strength before speaking again. The searchers of today, the thinkers of tomorrow, the builders of whatever comes next, they're all parts of the same ongoing reply. In this sense, time doesn't break the conversation. It extends it. Each age speaks in the vocabulary available to it. The first civilization used stone and stars. We use data and machines. The next might use something we can't yet imagine. But the structure of the exchange, question, response, wonder, understanding, remains the same. It's the rhythm that holds civilization together, across the long silences. There's something humbling in realizing that Earth itself might be fluent in this language. The more we study ecosystems, the more we see that balance and feedback govern everything. Forests communicate through root networks. Rivers respond to rainfall in self-correcting patterns. Even the atmosphere adjusts to maintain equilibrium. Life and matter, in their own ways, are always conversing. We're simply one expression of that larger dialogue, the part of the planet that can ask out loud what it already knows in silence. That's why the study of the ancient world is never just about the past. It's about recognizing that we are participating in the same story, continuing the same questions. The builders of pyramids and the scientists mapping the cosmos are speaking across millennia in the same voice, the voice of curiosity, the voice of awareness reaching out to itself through time, and maybe somewhere far away in space. The same thing is happening on another world. Another intelligence, another planet, engaging in its own version of the timeless conversation. If civilizations rise and fall everywhere as they do here, then the universe must be full of these quiet exchanges. Worlds asking who they are, remembering themselves through the echoes of their own creations. When we send our signals into the cosmos, we're joining that chorus. We're not shouting into the void. We're speaking into an ongoing dialogue that has always existed. The message doesn't have to be complicated. It can be as simple as, we're here, we are listening. That's what the first civilization might have been saying too, through their monuments, through their patterns, through the precision that still hums quietly beneath our feet. The timeless conversation doesn't require words. It happens through awareness itself, the act of noticing, of connecting, of caring enough to wonder. It moves through myth and science, through silence and noise, through destruction and renewal. It's what makes intelligence feel ancient, even when it's new. It's what binds every age into one. When the first civilization fell silent, they didn't end the dialogue. They passed it forward. When we fall silent, we will do the same. The conversation will continue through whatever form the next awareness takes, whether human or something beyond. Because Earth doesn't stop speaking, and the universe doesn't stop answering. Perhaps that's the real immortality. Not the survival of any one people or culture, but the persistence of the question itself. The question that has echoed since the first eyes looked at the stars. What are we part of? Every civilization asks it. Every silence refines it. Every rediscovery replies. And maybe when the next civilization rises and looks back at our ruins, they'll feel what we feel now, that faint, familiar recognition. The sense that they've heard this voice before, even if they can't remember when. They'll add their own thoughts, their own discoveries, their own silences. And in that, the conversation will remain timeless, never ending, never repeating, just deepening somewhere out there. In the long memory of the universe, the first question and the final answer might already exist side by side, waiting for us to realize they've been the same thing all along. And Earth will keep listening, as it always has, turning slowly beneath the stars, carrying every voice, every silence, Every echo into the next dawn of understanding. A final reflection. As we close this exploration into the possibility of civilizations that came before us, we're left not with definitive answers, but with something perhaps more valuable. Questions that invite us to see our world differently. Whether or not a first civilization existed in the form we've imagined, the search itself has value. It reminds us that history is never finished being written, that the Earth holds more secrets than we've yet uncovered, and that the boundary between myth and reality is more permeable than we once believed. The patterns we've examined, the monuments aligned to stars, the flood myths matching geological events, the sophisticated engineering predating known civilizations, the chemical signatures hidden in sediment, all point to a truth we're only beginning to appreciate: that human capability extends far deeper into prehistory than conventional timelines acknowledge. We are not the first to wonder about those who came before us, and we won't be the last. Future generations will look back at our ruins with the same mixture of awe and confusion that we feel when standing before the pyramids or walking among megalithic stones. They'll ask the same questions we're asking now, and perhaps that's the most important lesson from this journey. We're all participants in something larger than ourselves, a planetary conversation that spans ages, a collective memory that persists through stone and story, through silence and rediscovery. The first civilization, if it existed, speaks to us still. Not through words we can read or artifacts we can hold, but through the patterns they left behind, through the questions they inspire, through the recognition that we are part of a cycle far older than any single society. Their legacy isn't in proving they existed. It's in teaching us to look more carefully at the world, to listen more closely to what Earth and time are trying to tell us, and to understand that knowledge, once gained, never truly disappears. It simply waits, patient as stone, for the next generation ready to hear it. So perhaps the real question isn't whether a first civilization existed, but rather, what will we leave behind for those who come after us? What patterns will they find? What messages will they decode? And will they recognize, as we're beginning to, that they're not discovering something new, but remembering something very, very old? The conversation continues. The silence waits, and somewhere between the two, memory endures.